All right, let's see here. Good afternoon, Professor Schilling. My name is Ashton White. It's nice to have you see my face. Today I will be presenting my two leaders that I have been doing this project on and the comparison between them. I will be comparing Dr. Brett Darrington, who is the founder of Dr. Brett's Sports Therapy, which I work for, and I have been working for him for the past year, and Dr. Toby Cosgrove, a PhD cardiothoracic surgeon who is the former CEO of the Cleveland Clinic. So here's my overview. I will be giving each business leader's description, talking about them. I will be giving their greatest career achievement, how they handled a specific challenge within their career, the power bases and impact of such that they possess, their mission, vision, and their entrepreneurial mindset and the comparison between the two, their application of their leadership styles and their leadership theory, the comparison between their leadership styles, the lessons that we can derive from such, and then I will be giving a critical reflection at the end on my thoughts. So, here's the description of the leaders that I have chosen. So Dr. Brett Darrington is a chiropractor, a certified athletic trainer, and a lifelong athlete himself who built a sports therapy clinic here in Agoura Hills, California, where I live. His practice is very hands-on and interpersonal, with the mission of treating every athlete like a professional. So he was an All-American runner, an Ironman competitor in a very high-end world stage in Hawaii, in Kona, Hawaii, in the World Championships. And after his retirement from the sports world, he went back to school to become a chiropractor and started his clinic in the early 2000s. So the person I've chosen to contrast to Dr. Brett Darrington, who also is my boss, is Dr. Toby Cosgrove, who is a cardiothoracic surgeon who became the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, from 2004 to 2017. Under his leadership, the clinic grew into a global healthcare standard with clinics in hospitals within Abu Dhabi and London. He is seen as a global healthcare innovator, and given his global leadership, we're looking at a contrast between a very local scale and a very global scale of leadership styles. So we're going to talk about the greatest career achievements of these two. Again, I have a one-on-one connection with Dr. Brett, so I have many examples from him, especially during our interview. He mentioned several examples. However, he mentioned one that by far stands among the rest as his most greatest achievement. And he said it was building a trusted, patient-centered clinic for athletes and their families to turn to. His reputation, in his opinion, heavily involves empathy, expertise, and results-driven referrals for a long-term relationship. 80 to 90% of his patients come from referrals from current patients. And he is very proud of the fact that the athletes that he works with recover stronger than they ever have before, even with working with other clinicians. On the entire other hand, Dr. Toby Cosgrove's biggest achievement from my research was creating a patient-first culture within the Cleveland Clinic, and then expanding this cultural model into a global organization internationally. His reforms that he made at the clinic as a leader show transparency, quality, and patient-centered care within the Cleveland Clinic originally, and then worldwide as he expanded it. So, handling challenges within their two respective fields is a daily occurrence. Both of them are dealing with high-stakes issues, especially because they are dealing with humans and their physical body, and they're doing hands-on One is a cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Cosgrove, so the stakes are a little bit higher than Dr. Brett Darrington's. However, both are handling challenges on a daily basis. However, during my interview with Dr. Brett, he mentioned one particular case that was his by far most ridiculous dilemma, as he put it. And this was a patient, an elderly patient, that was recovering from a very rare and complicated OATS knee injury and then surgery. I won't go into the specifics, however, the recovery took over 150 combined hours of therapy from Dr. Brett personally, and it required a lot of persistence, creativity, and encouragement, and also a lot of restarting in ground zero. He went from original treatment, about 6 months in, required surgery, starting over again. After the surgery happened, another 6 months goes by, very little effect. We're going to restart again and again and again, and eventually he did rehab this patient. I was working there the last couple of months that this patient was being seen, and so I was at the very tail end of this experience, so I got to see a little bit of it. And eventually the patient walked out those doors almost essentially healed with very little repercussions. However, it took a lot of ethical balancing on his part to really kind of balance the difference between the push towards recovery and the safety of the patient. And he mentioned this as his biggest overall clinical challenge. Based on my research, Dr. Cosgrove's key challenge was facing resistance from other clinicians and physicians and surgeons when he pushed for transparency in reporting patient outcomes. This goes back to his greatest achievement. In Western medicine in general, unfortunately, a lot of times patient outcomes are not as important as the bottom line of the physicians and of big pharma and big medicine in general. They want to be on paper as reputable and as highly successfully rate as possible, rather than the actual outcome of the patients. However, Dr. Cosgrove felt strongly that patients had a right to be not healed, and therefore had a right to that information being published with the physician that they worked with. So it's an ethical dilemma between patient outcomes and the pride of the physician. A lot of the times physicians want to allow pride for themselves and show that they solved the problem, that they fixed the patient. However, a lot of the times the patient 6 months to a year after surgery and care at the clinic originally when Cosgrove first started did not have acceptable outcomes, even though on paper the physician claimed it as a success and a successful outcome. So his biggest challenge was resistance to that change, that he wanted to change that entire system, and he got a lot of pushback from doctors because it is going to lower their metrics and lower their pay and lower the bottom line of the clinic. However, it is in the best interests of the patients, and that is what he was pushing for. Let me go back. But I guess both examples show that leaders must balance ethics, courage, and resilience when facing obstacles, and it is a slow process dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Brett is on a very localized, individual level that he's dealing with, and it's more internal for him. And Dr. Cosgrove's is on a wide scale where he's dealing with hundreds of doctors within his clinic, and he has to deal with changing the entire kind of social appeal that these doctors have to the public versus their actual physical outcomes. So let's see here. So the power bases and impact of their behavior. Dr. Brett relies heavily on his expert power because of his deep love and knowledge of sports and therefore sports therapy. He has a lot of referent power as well. He's very trusted and respected in his community, and he has built that trust and respect over decades of being in business and dealing with patients and giving his absolute all to patients like that OATS knee surgery patient that he dealt with. He would do that for any patient. He treats every patient the same, and he does not give anyone less than his best. And I believe that the patients and colleagues of his trust him both as a professional and as a fellow athlete, and almost as a friend. However, Cosgrove has legitimate power He's the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. He also has expert power as he is a world-renowned PhD surgeon and physician. He has coercive power as well because of his authority and his renownedness. When he's pushing for cultural reform and transparency, and especially when he's pushing this to a globally expanded level, he has a lot of coercive power, or at least he is attempting to create his coercive power by changing the atmosphere in Cleveland Clinic. The impact of these behaviors is, number one, people love Dr. Bret Darrington. I can tell you from experience from working with him and from his interview, he's a very humble gentleman. However, he is very aware that people do, in fact, love him and love being treated by him. His schedule is constantly full and constantly has cancellation lists of people who are waiting in line to come get him to treat them. The impact of Toby's experience is on a much more large scale, however, is just as impactful to the patients. He's doing this for different situations. However, both leaders used it to make their organizations move forward. So their mission, vision statements, and entrepreneurial mindsets are slightly different. Bret's mission, as I've kind of touched on, is to treat every athlete like a professional. And his vision focuses on education, prevention, and building his community around his small clinic. He shows his entrepreneurial traits like persuasiveness and adaptability. When he's claiming that he is these things, however, he doesn't come off as a very... Originally, when you meet him, he's wearing a t-shirt and shorts and running shoes, and he does not look like a doctor. He looks like an athlete. He's very fit and he's a very athletic human being. However, he does not come off as an extremely smart individual originally. As soon as you start to work with him, you realize that he doesn't have anything to prove, and he is a very humble leader. He doesn't need to have your approval. He knows what he's doing, and he knows that it works, and he knows that if you have buy-in, he will help you, and he can indeed help your injury, whatever the case may be, post-surgery. So he's very persistent as well. He worked at a clinic previously. He worked within the walls of a larger clinic that ran into some legal trouble, and he had to entirely restart his clinic from the ground up because that clinic got shut down, and he was dealing with reputation issues superseding him, unfortunately, because of the gentleman that was employing his office within his larger clinic, and so he had to restart his clinic in about 2012 after 10 years of business. He had to entirely restart, and from the ground up, he has now rebuilt his entire clinic, and now it is larger than it was before. On the other hand, Cosgrove's mission was patients first, above all else, above the physicians. And his vision was to expand Cleveland Clinic's patients first model into reaching a global healthcare standard. He demonstrated his innovation in risk-taking and expanding these into his Abu Dhabi and London locations. He has entirely rewritten the book on how it is possible to treat a patient and then them not be successful and have them come back, and how that not affect the physician. Physicians, like I have mentioned, are very likely to want to fix the patient on the first go-around. However, he has entirely rewritten the book on how that's possible, and a lot of innovation and openness and risk-taking has been involved in that. And in his clinics, there is a lack of ego that is in place in a lot of other clinics. So both leaders embody an entrepreneurial mindset, however, on very, very different scales. So the application of their leaderships, in theory, I believe are fairly obvious that Dr. Bret is a servant leader. He listens, he empathizes, and he puts the growth of others, his patients and his staff specifically, at the center of what he does, and most importantly, above himself. Like I mentioned, he's very humble and he has nothing to prove. He will allow you to open up to him rather than him opening up to you, and he will allow you to show him the parts of you that you need, or that are needed to be fixed, and then he will apply himself the best that he can. I have an example of this that's fantastic. One time there was a patient who presented a very unique and difficult physical problem that they had. And unfortunately, Dr. Brett felt like he did not have enough information or enough requisite knowledge to give proper advice or proper treatment to this patient. So he was honest and he said, unfortunately, I don't feel comfortable addressing that issue. I want to come back to this. I'm going to go and research and come to a conclusion on my own and gain more knowledge before I give you my therapy. And this is exactly, in fact, what Dr. Toby Cosgrove is trying to initiate in his practice, which is why originally I felt that these two were so fantastic as a comparison. Because Dr. Brett is a great example of an individual that Dr. Toby Cosgrove wants all of the doctors under his care to become that individual. So he was humble and he said, we do not need to treat this right away. I want to take a step back and educate myself further so that I can be more of an effective doctor for you. Dr. Toby Cosgrove is trying to do this like Dr. Brett has, but on a transformational leadership level. He set a bold vision to change hundreds and hundreds of doctors' approach to patient care, and he pushed for innovation within each one of the doctors, and he reshaped the entire culture of the Cleveland Clinic, and by rewriting the rules of what's going to happen with patient care outcomes. This created a cultural shift and a cultural change within his clinic, and therefore when he expanded it into his other two locations, the vision and innovation that he had is therefore transformational among massive amounts of doctors and patients. Thousands of patients are under Dr. Toby Cosgrove's care or oversight, and therefore this is very transformational. I believe because of these two theories, though, they're both very effective. They're just matched to the context in which they're operating and the goals of which they are operating under. So, the comparison between their leadership styles, I have one-on-one expertise with Dr. Brett, as I've mentioned several times. He is very personal and very relatable to most of the patients that come in. He's an athlete just like they are. He does swimming and biking and running and lifting, and he is an outdoorsman, and he is very involved in the community of athletics in this area that he works with, and so therefore he's very trust-based, and he is very able to implement that trust that he has in other people towards his patients on a very individual one-on-one level. However, Cosgrove's leadership is systematic. It's very visionary and forward-thinking on a much broader scale, and it's very change-oriented. He's very focused on large-scale change and long-term strategy. So the relational trust that Dr. Brett has with his one-on-one patients is what Dr. Toby Cosgrove is trying to replicate on a very large scale. So their shared values are patient first and credibility and expertise. However, their style of doing it is different because Cosgrove is operating on a scale where he is influencing other doctors to therefore influence their patients. Dr. Brett is just one-on-one influencing his patients. The biggest lessons and takeaways from this, in my opinion, are threefold. Number one, effective leaders balance vision with empathy. Brett shows this with each and every single patient interaction. He shows empathy to his patients with understanding of what they're going through because of his own personal experience, and then he shares them his vision for their future and their recovery. From day one, he gives them, this is what our potential outcomes are, and here's the steps of what we're going to be able to do with you to help you get back on the bike or swimming or running or whatever it is that the outcome of the patient is. And he allows them to set the goal, and then he will implement his techniques in order to give them the goal. Cosgrove balanced all of what I just said with systematic reform and implementing that by the book with all of his doctors under his care. And if they did not follow these things, they were out the door. He created an environment where everyone needed to adhere to these rules, and if they did not, the trust was broken, and therefore the trust was broken with Cosgrove, and they did not have a job anymore. So that's the second part, is that transparency builds trust. Whether with open communication with patients or public reporting of outcomes of patient care, honesty strengthens credibility. Even if you are the leader, it is okay to admit that you don't know, or that you were wrong, or that the patient outcome was less than optimal. It doesn't show weakness. In fact, it shows a pride in which you are taking in your patient rather than yourself. And thirdly, leadership depends on followership. Neither of these people could succeed without the trust and buy-in of others that they have served. So if you do not have people who trust and follow what you are saying and what you are doing, especially because Cosgrove is doing this on a very large scale, and especially because Brett's doing it with athletes who demand a lot of their bodies, both people are dealing with high-risk outcomes. The trust and buy-in of the patients is essential. So I guess the comparison taught me that leadership can look very different depending on the context, but at its core, it always relies on trust, the mission statement, and accountability. Personally, I learned that leadership is not about authority, it's about aligning values with the needs of the people that you serve. So if it was about authority, then it would be about writing off a patient as a success, even if it was not 6 or 1 year down the road, 6 months to a year down the road, in Cosgrove's case, or in Brett's case, showing humility and saying, I don't know at this moment, we're going to take a step back and we're going to rework the way that we are approaching your therapy to get you back out on your given sport. And the transparency that is in that is what leads into the followership there. So it all ties in together. You must have a strong vision. You must be transparent in that vision and have a lack of ego, which then follows into the followers, allowing them to build trust with you. That's an essential part of it. So the reflection here on all of this that I've talked about is the reason why I chose Brett. Is because I had direct access to him as he is my boss, and I have been with him on many patients, and I understand what's going on in his clinic, as I am also a PT. So I have a very deep understanding of what is going on, although he is on a much greater scale of understanding. I am still able to kind of comprehend his leadership style on a day-to-day basis. He is authentic. He has, from first-hand insights into his leadership, lots and lots and lots and lots of people who swear that without Dr. Brett, their bodies would not be able to do what they do. And I believe that leadership among the community of athletes is crucial, and the trust that people have in him is crucial, because many accounts of people saying that their bodies wouldn't be able to do what they're doing without his help is a huge leadership check mark, in my opinion. So why I chose Cosgrove is because they are very similar in what they want to do with an individual patient level. Cosgrove is doing it on a large-scale visionary model and trying to affect change on the medical industry in general, and create the environment that Dr. Brett has with his patients one-on-one on a large scale, and change the entire system of the way that modern Western medicine healthcare works. So this comparison taught me leadership looks very different. Like I said, it works across scales in many different ways, although it always requires is trust, a mission, and an accountability standard. Those three things are crucial, and unless you have them, you are not going to be an effective leader, especially in this healthcare environment that I'm talking about. Here are my references. I formatted them in 7th APA edition. There are primary resources from Dr. Cosgrove and his Cleveland Clinic, as well as our leadership textbooks and frameworks. I also went into several other very accredited sources to learn about Cosgrove and to learn about the leadership changes that he's trying to effect, as well as using our textbook to buttress my opinions and my facts that I'm using in this presentation. So, that being said, thank you very much for listening, Professor. This has been Ashton, and yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day.